All right, welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, we'll be switching to another matter which we started off with last week, and don't worry, you'll see that slide soon. But we're joined now from Abuja Studios by Representative Victor Ogene, who is the Deputy Chairman, Media and Publicity Committee of the House of Representatives. Morning, and thank you for joining us today. Well, talking about this, I mean, the kind of response we're getting, lots of people are shocked that it actually did happen, but we do know that the House of Reps also raised this matter about the National Common Entrance cutoff marks. What can you tell us about the latest development and what the House talked about at the time?
Thank you, Chamberlain. It's my pleasure to be here. I raised this matter as a matter of urgent public importance last Wednesday, a day after resumption from our short break to begin the third session of the 7th Assembly. And in doing that, I thought about the fact that we should not sacrifice merit on the platter of zoning, federal character, and what have you. The Federal Unity Schools, as you know, was set up in 1966 with about 3 institutions. Today, there are 104 of them, and from what I gathered, you have 30% required for merit in order to gain admission. Another 30% is reserved for the entire states, 36 states of the Federation and the FCT. And then another 30% is left for environmental factors, which I understand to mean the catchment areas, the home states where these institutions are located. And the remaining 10% is for exigencies. Maybe that is where officials and some other considerations come in. But what we saw from the recently released cutoff marks for the year 2013 is a far cry, because I speak personally as a representative from Anambra State and somebody from the Southeast, and then a Nigerian, because Anambra State is made, a pupil from Anambra State is made to score 139 marks on merit to be able to beat the cutoff mark, whereas some others are made to score just 2 and 4 marks for the same examination. I think that it runs contrary to the provisions of the Nigerian Constitution in Chapter 42, subsection 1, which says that no Nigerian shall be discriminated against on the basis of community, his ethnicity, religion, tribe, gender, and what have you. So that was why I raised that. But to come to your question about what the House of Representatives is doing about it, my colleagues agreed with me and the motion passed, and what we did was to mandate our House Committee on Education to interface with the National Examinations Council and the Federal Ministry of Education. And to show the urgency of this matter, we requested them to report back to the House when we resume plenary tomorrow.
All right, well, having identified some of these issues, because, I mean, you have people who talked about, we went to some of these schools, and it's taken a different dimension now, where people have got to score 2 or 4 out of 200 to get admission into schools. But this has been happening for a while. And there are those who also think that, okay, at the end of the day, when they get back to the House, what do you think, what kind of steps do you think the House will take? Not just to correct this singular event, but to institutionalize that correction to the extent that you won't see this kind of thing pop up again, so that merit will always have its place.
Yeah. Okay, even though I didn't hear the last bit of the question, but I heard where you wanted to know what the House would do regarding restoring merit as a critical element in the admission process. That is why I reeled out some of the statistics regarding how these admissions are done in 30, 30, 30, and 10%, and leaving merit with just 30%. So for me as an individual, and I think for most members, many members of the House, we would want a situation where we raise the merit quotient to about 50, 60%. Yes, I agreed that the unity schools are supposed to be unifiers to get people from all corners of the country to get admitted into these institutions. But we should not sacrifice that on the altar of, on the exigency of just taking in anybody. Basically, I think that it has been a failure of governance at different levels, and if you permit me, I would explain. Some state governments have dwelt so much on building infrastructure, school buildings, but as you and I know, the hood does not make the monk. So you cannot just build infrastructures without the requisite drive to make the peoples actually learn. And that is the basis of any educational policy. Because if you have the buildings and you do not quite educate the child, even it's a constitutional issue. Under Chapter 2, Section 18, Sub 1 of the Nigerian Constitution, every Nigerian child has the right to free and compulsory education. Yes, we have the Universal Basic Education Scheme, but who is monitoring it? How well is it working? Only 2 days ago, a former vice president of this country, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, stated while being given an award at the Geneva Institute of Diplomacy and International Relations that his own father in Jada, Adamawa State, had to be jailed by the native authorities way back when he was a kid because he simply refused him to go to school. Today, if that action was not taken by the native authorities, you know the role he has played in this country. So education is quite important in the total well-being of the individual and the nation. So for most of these state governments, I would think that they should go back to the issue of actually ensuring that every child gets basic education. They should put money in recruitment of teachers. They should make instructional materials available. It's also a failing of parenthood. How many of these parents, including you and I, spend time to add some extra lessons to their words? This was the way we grew up. After you return from school, your parents had 1 or 2 things to add in the teaching process. But today, the man and the woman are out there because of the economy. So down the line, is a failing of different structures of society. Even religious organizations and social groups have not contributed much as they ought to do, or as they did in the past. So, and communities. So we need to use this opportunity to re-examine the whole aspect of especially primary and basic education.
Well, you talked about institutional failure at many levels. I mean, from the family, community, even at the level of the state government. What about at the federal level? What do you think that the House of Representatives, for instance, could have done that they did not do in the past? Did you catch my question?
Again, I heard the first part. If you're talking about what the central government is doing, I think that public policy must always seek to improve the quality and access to public education. And that is why I talked about the Universal Basic Education Scheme. is supposed to be a central government initiative. And if you have an initiative on the table and you do not closely monitor it, then it is bound to fail. I mean, some officials, it's an executive policy, this admission process we are talking about, and that is why I easily referred to the disclosure by former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. I don't know how many state governments or the engagement level by the executive branch arm of government with the state governments to ensure that the provisions of the Constitution, as it requires the inalienable right of the child to free and compulsory education, how it is being implemented. So at the central government level, a lot more needs to be done beyond just ensuring that a few privileged people get admission and some others who actually merit it do not. There must be some adherence to standards.
But at the legislative level, at your level, where you're supposed to have oversight functions,